Hello?
Hey, Brad, it's Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
I'm so happy we finally got to do this.
Me too.
Been really excited about it. So how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be touring again. Not that it's taking over my life. I did about 3 weeks in Canada, and summertime is a killer trying to get people to come to shows. Unless you're playing, big festivals, that's about the only thing there is market-wise for me. And I haven't played any folk festivals in so long.
Yeah.
But I'll be going out again in the fall. And I already have about a week and a half of shows booked in November in Canada, on the West Coast. So Alberta and British Columbia, Vancouver. Pot country.
Oh, I'm sure you've got plenty of fans on that side of the world, just ready to come to the show, looking for a reason.
Yes, indeed.
We were talking over email, and touring is not easy, especially, after you've, not been doing it consistently for a while. And I guess that's what I got a little bit from you over our emails, is that it's exhausting out there trying to get yourself, which I'm guessing is, part of just trying to get yourself in tour shape.
Yeah. It's, you just kind of have to resign yourself to the fact that every day you're going to be on the highway, and every night you're going to be checking into a hotel and doing exactly the same thing. But fortunately, the shows are always an adventure.
Yeah.
And, having a day off here and there is nice to get some rest, but it gets kind of dull when you're not playing. So I like to play a lot when I do go out. And we're doing like a duo thing now. So it's not Crash Test Dummies. It's the first time I've gone out as Brad Roberts of Crash Test Dummies.
Right.
And we're playing rooms that are intimate. They're rooms where people go to really listen to music. And I was actually surprised that when we did the ballads, you could hear a pin drop in every room we played. Like, people were locked in totally on what we were doing. It wasn't like people talking through the set. Nothing like that. And I was, I couldn't be more pleased. Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah.
And, a little nerve-wracking, frankly, being that close up and personal with everybody. But I kind of enjoy the nerve-wrackingness of it. It makes me rise to the occasion and occasionally get better than I would have been otherwise.
Yeah. I don't remember who I was. I felt like it was a documentary I caught, probably the trailer of recently, of a famed, I think it was a classical musician saying, if you're not figuring out a way to make yourself nervous before a show, then you're not going to be able to give it everything you've got. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I see some truth in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's an interesting comment.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some truth to it, that nervous energy. Get propelled by nervous energy.
Yeah. To go out there and do it. So on this trip, I know you've posted new singles, but I guess they're not exactly new songs, right?
Well, actually, I only posted the one new song, and it's not a new song. You're right. It's an old-ish song that I wrote like 5 years ago.
Right.
And
I'm talking about "I'll Be Peaceful Then."
Yes, we are.
Which
and
is a great song. I'm telling you, I'm not throwing it at you because we're talking, but this is one of my favorite songs that I've heard this year, and I feel like it sort of came out of nowhere. And I don't mean that condescendingly, but any artist who's been around for so long, a lot of folks have trouble with the creative fire and keeping really good, writings happening. But I don't get that from this song. I get that you're still in a great place to write music.
Well, thank you very much. And, it did kind of come out of nowhere in that one day I was kind of like, kids seem to be putting out one song at a time now and not really caring. They just put it out.
Mm-hmm.
They just literally, take a song and put it on the internet. And that's it, to some extent I mourn the loss of the album that has, a continuity and feels like it belongs together, a collection of songs. And that's kind of how I used to write. Well, it was definitely how I used to write. You'd wanted a palette of different feelings and, colors. I'm mixing my metaphors here. And now, people just put out a song at a time. And I kind of thought, well, I could either mourn that, the loss of the album, or, I could just put one of my songs up, because I'm about to go on the road, and it can't hurt, and we'll play it at the show, which we did, and it went over extremely well. It's one of those songs that really grabs people. So I discovered.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I've been talking with a lot of people, I guess, about this. I mean, it's always the thing, and it's back when you first started. I'm sure it was a different kind of argument about how you promote yourself and market yourself, and now this is the specific thing that we're looking at right now. Is that putting singles out and everything, and I'm happy to have new music, however it can come out. So, but at the same time, when you have vinyl sales that's kind of taken off in the past decade the way they have, it's not that there's a complete a complete absence of album lovers, because
that's true,
and it's become a niche for certain. But we're not talking about Springsteen doing "Born in the USA" in the '80s at the height of everything. But
it's funny you say that, because I was just in an elevator yesterday overhearing two boys. They were like 16 tops, and they were talking about doing something with their turntable. I don't know what it was, just some sort of fiddling around. Like, there wasn't scratching or anything, but they were talking about actually, like, these kids owned a fucking turntable and a record collection. And and they were just kids. So clearly it's become kind of a thing again.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually mourned the fact that there was never a vinyl release of my first record, except for in Europe, and I never really got a copy. I don't have a copy of anything I own. and then I heard that God Shoveled His Feet got re-released on vinyl by BMG recently.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know I don't know how you buy it, like if they put it in record stores or if you order it on the net or what. That's the problem to me with vinyl. It's too heavy to carry around on the road. I mean, it's not, but it is.
When you put a lot of them together, it becomes very heavy, yeah.
Yeah, and 30 CDs weighs nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
And but it would be fun to do a vinyl edition if I could. But that, of course, means getting a distribution deal and blah blah blah. And, it's just so much easier not to have a physical product.
Right.
Like, people don't even have CDs anymore. And as a matter of fact, MacBook didn't put a CD player in their new AirBooks. Mm-hmm. It's like, that's kind of fucked.
Yeah, I mean, we still get serviced here at in radio stations with CDs from labels, but it's become much less. It's much more of a digital servicing, and and that's But at the same time,
do they give you artwork with it?
Most of the time, yeah. I mean, there's a lot that comes in that is promo copy without artwork, but once the full album comes out, we usually do get service. But then again, I work in a different sort of radio than. I'm AAA radio. I'm non-com radio, publicly supported radio. So it does work a little bit different down here, and we're a bit more purists. I can't imagine the pop station down the street gets the same type of service that we get. They probably don't care, But when the album comes out, we like to get it, and our listeners love to, if we can get a box of them to give away, they love to get those too, and they still pick up the CDs. But, I mean, obviously CDs are not selling. These same people who would love to get them for free, it's not like they're going to the record store and buying them. If they go to the record store, they're buying the vinyl.
Well, and in fact, I have a couple of friends who are like in their 30s, and I give them copies of my records, and they're like, I can't use this. They got nothing.
That's funny.
It's funny.
I remember having the same dilemma with cassettes at some point. Well, tying it back around to the music, I do want to go back to the song "I'll Be Peaceful" then, though, because again, it deserves its own spotlight in our conversation here. And so it's been around for a few years. I've told you over the email, I get this great Tom Waits vibe from this song in all the best ways. But I mean, these are I don't know how biographical this song is, but it's not the happiest of songs. I mean, it's not a completely depressive song, but it's sort of dark.
Yeah, it is sort of dark, and I think it works here. And it's funny because when I write a dark lyric, I find that if I play dark chords, it just doesn't seem to work. Like all the chords in that song are major chords. There's a minor chord. It kind of goes back between the major and the minor, but for the most part, they're major chords, and it almost has kind of like there's something about church in the song too, like in the way musically, the way it feels. I'm not sure what that is, but it's almost like a spiritual kind of, like not spiritual in the sense of being a spiritual person, but spiritual in the sort of more genre sense of the word. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And yeah, those words came very quickly and easily, oddly enough. And I was very happy with them, and I was very nervous about writing the music because I thought, well, it's got to live up to the lyric. And then that ended up coming very easily too. And I didn't feel like I had to mistrust it for coming quickly. It actually seemed to really work. So yeah, that's a song that I'm most proud of out of all the songs that I've come up with since the last record I put out, Ooh La La, mm-hmm. which I love, from beginning to end. I really am proud of all the tracks on that.
Yeah.
But then after that, we had a bunch of leftover tracks, and I just wasn't confident enough in some of them to ever have enough for it to be a record. And I just kind of got waylaid on it. But this one song just persisted, and so out it came. I really have done next to nothing in terms of promoting it or, I don't have a manager. I don't talk to people in radio. I'm a complete idiot at that stuff. And, so the only way it's ever going to get promoted is when I go out and play it.
Just hope people find it. I found it online, obviously. It was on Spotify, and I found it very interesting, though, that it was, it's listed under the Crash Test Dummies, but it says, and features Brad Roberts. Like...
I put that in because that was the only thing that, actually, I put that in for two reasons. One was because I was going to do a Brad Roberts tour, mm-hmm. And not a Crash Test Dummies tour. And then secondly, there's really no room for information on the net when you're selling your songs. Like, I did it through a thing called TuneCore. Mm-hmm. And they're a service that will send your song to Amazon and iTunes and Spotify and, every other fucking thing you can think of as well. Like all the formats. They're really good at it. And when you upload a song, you upload an image, and it can only have the name of... I think it can only have I wish I had the page in front of me, but you can have like a graphic, and you can have the name of the record and the name of the song, and then whether or not someone's featured, and that's it. Mm-hmm. You can't put in lyrics, you can't put in produced by, you can't put in any sort of liner notes. It's just bleak. So I thought, well, I have hardly any information to put here. I guess I'll put my name where it says features, because it, after all, does feature me.
Yeah, there's a big petition going online right now that people are signing. Lots of musicians are passing it around to start forcing these companies to include liner notes, at least some option where people can find the liner notes, because it's
really,
it's a big problem. Yeah, it's starting to happen. I feel that wave coming around. And I do think it will eventually happen, hopefully sooner than later, because I'm as big a music nerd as they come. So when I do get an album, and as soon as I put it on, the first thing I do is start reading the liner notes, because you never know what you're going to find in there. And, it's... Yeah. I want all of that.
No, I love liner notes. I used to practically fucking memorize them.
Yeah, same here. There was another song that popped up online, and I guess that's where I got the several songs. So what is Promised Land, then?
Promised Land is a song by an artist named Mark Mysterio. Mm-hmm. And, he just came to me and said, "Oh, I'm a big fan of yours, and I want to work with you." And he had this song, and I was like, okay, I'll put my voice in your song. He was just very, persuasive. Mm-hmm. And, I thought it was, for the kind of song it was, I thought it was really catchy.
Yeah.
And, but it's not really my thing. Yeah. It's just like I make a little guest appearance on it. It's not something I wrote or that I think about much. It's not really.
Gotcha.
Well, it's just a side thing I did.
Yeah, a great dance groove to it. But, it's hard not to notice what's going on with the hook of the song, which, of course, it seems to recall, your Crash Test Dummies calling card song with the
Yes, no, I threw that in there actually just off the cuff, and wasn't even thinking that it would end up in there. And, of course, it did.
On his part, it's almost like, how could he not? I mean, again, you're recalling your most famous single, and that's really fun. I love it when artists do that throughout their career anyway. They kind of leave the little Easter eggs of their past and everything in other songs, and that was a cool moment to hear that first time. Yeah,
no, I was glad he did it. I thought it worked.
Yeah. So, we've talked about, how you're thinking about just singles and everything, and you do have these other songs lying around, and of course, I would love to know, do you think these will ever lead to anything, whether it's just a series of singles coming out or an eventual album or anything? Are you writing towards anything?
Now that you've mentioned vinyl, now I'm thinking maybe I should write a record. And I'll put it out on vinyl, and that'll be the thing that makes me want to write a record. But, at one time in my life, I would really be suffering if I weren't writing. Mm-hmm. Because I pretty much equated my personal value with my work. And that's kind of a dangerous thing, especially in something like the music business, where things are not consistent. And if you're over-identifying with your work, then you're in for, trouble on a personal level. Yeah. And I have had to sort of train myself to enjoy life.
Not a bad thing.
To be quite honest.
Yeah.
I've had to turn away from feeling that way because it was just not getting me anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I purposely stayed away from writing for a while. And I also began to feel like I was not necessarily writing from the kind of vital place that I needed to write from, and that I needed a break. And I think actually that's more like a realization that I've had now, having taken the break, than it was the rationale for having taken the break. Taking the break was me actually saying, okay, you got to get over this whole, equating your self-image with whether or not you're being creative and productive. Mm-hmm. And in the work with music. And so I purposely took a bunch of time away from writing. And I did have an experience recently. I've been reading about the concept of infinity in mathematics, and in particular Bertrand Russell, who argued that one of the great mathematicians of the 19th century had basically solved the problem of infinity from a mathematical point of view. And of course, infinity is one of those subjects that originally came out of philosophy, back when philosophy and math weren't two different subjects in Greek times, for example. And I started to think about how the problem of infinity and theological problems are almost hand in hand, because when you start to ask about something like a first cause, like, well, we need God in order for there to be a universe, because, we need a cause. We need a first cause. We can't imagine the world infinitely regressing. It has to start somewhere. Well, where did it start? It started by the uncaused cause, as it were, the first primal cause. And, so mathematics and the idea of God became intertwined at an early stage in the history of Western thinking. So I wrote a lyric that's kind of about the universe, but before it existed. And it was inspired a little bit by the tone of Genesis in the King James translation of the Bible. And the rhythms of the language in that. I was reading that at the time as well. And I think it's the best lyric I've ever written in my life. It's really, really good. And I'm terrified about writing the music because I know it has to be as good as the lyric. And
that's definitely a lot of pressure right there. Yeah.
So I am definitely going to set that one to music. And that lyric took me 3 days of continuous, sustained effort to create. And the lyrics I'd been writing in the past were very much done like in an hour. And I had got used to working that way. I would be like, okay, you can't think too much. You want to just sit down, close your eyes, and write whatever comes into your head, and just let it go. Let it, if it's nonsense, write it down. Just keep going. And eventually, sometimes I'd write an entire lyric, and then I'd write a second one as an afterthought, because I was in the rhythm of it. And it would turn out to be a great lyric, and I'd scrap the first one. So it was, but this most recent lyric I did was very much like I had an idea that I wanted to explore. I knew what it was when I sat down, and I pursued that until it was manifest, until it was as good as it could be. And that was a totally different experience for me. It's the kind of, and it was very much propelled forward by reading. And I think that, and in fact, that's what I did instead of, so to speak, writing music. When I decided to stop writing music, I consciously went back to what I'd been studying at university, which was philosophy and English literature. And I just read purely for pleasure in both those areas for hours. Like back in my student days, just spend a day with a book, and another day, and another day. And
you reconnect with your roots, and suddenly you find the inspiration again.
Exactly.
There's been sort of mantra is the right word at all, but going back to what you were talking about, what inspired that lyric and everything. And I'd heard somewhere a long time ago that, the whole concept about living in the present, which we always hear, and sometimes in a cliche manner to a point. But I somewhat became obsessed with that idea of infinity in the terms of mortality, of living forever. And someone said, if you can live completely in the present, then you are alive forever already. And it is forever that you're inside. And I thought, that's a great way to handle life.
Yeah.
As long as I'm here right now, that I'm never dead. And that's fine.
Yeah, you're alive until you're not.
Right.
And the whole time you're alive, you're alive.
That's right. So not to go too much further down.
That is really... that's a good one, though.
I'd love to, I can't wait, hopefully, that you do put this to music. And I know there was something else that you did that I feel like sort of goes a little bit with, your philosophical background to a point, because there was, maybe it was a collaborative record you did a few years back, excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, the Rajanaka mantra?
No, it's actually Rajanika, but yeah, I wouldn't be able to pronounce that either. No worries.
Yeah. Where did that come from?
So yeah, now that came from me taking up yoga. I decided that I wanted to learn yoga, and as is often the case with me, if I decide to engage in something, that I do it 100% or nothing. Mm-hmm. And I became completely obsessed with yoga. And I had a private teacher who would come to me 3 times a week. And, it was a pretty big investment over the years. Mm-hmm. But I got my yoga chops down. And as I was studying the actual asana and the postures, I became interested in the sort of larger question of yoga. And initially when people practiced yoga, it was simply practicing sitting and not being uncomfortable sitting. So and it was merely preparation for meditation. Now, these days, the asana has become a much more extended practice, and the way people do yoga now was only developed towards the end of the 19th century. The old ancient text called the Yoga Pradipika, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, is the postures in it are few and far between. But nevertheless, the West has kind of snipped off the rest of the equation. Instead of seeing asana as preparation for meditation, it's done as, physical fitness kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Now, some yoga practitioners have a more spiritual approach to it than that. It's true, but the point being that once I started getting good at the physical asana, I became interested in why these people had done this to begin with. And it has to do with meditation and mantra and what all these things mean. So I began to study that. And there's a guy named Douglas Brooks, who's a professor at the University of Rochester. And he is one of the handful of Sanskrit reading, writing, literate people in the West, and he's an extremely good teacher. He's got the whole scholarly point of view down, and he also is deeply connected with people who practice in India. So he's kind of a nice double-edged sword. I really don't buy the guru model, and neither does this guy. The idea that you have this one teacher who tells you everything and you just fucking do that.
Right.
It's basically stupid. And of course, the old cliche of the fallen guru is extremely true. I mean, like, the number of gurus that have been exposed for being sexual predators is unbelievable. It's very easily abused. But anyways, I began to study mantra and the philosophy behind mantra. And for me, it was basically an extension of my Western philosophical training. Because, look, they talk about things like the concept of infinity. And that becomes part of the theological discussion over there. And then in the East, what they didn't get rid of the myth and just, you know, in the way that way that we have in the West. And that's not to say that they're stuck in like an ancient paradigm, but philosophy didn't get separated off from myth quite so radically. Like modern philosophy in the West, you know, they don't talk about the gods. But for Eastern philosophers, Shiva is not just like a guy with long hair and a snake around his neck who created and sustained and destroys the universe in a systematic way at every moment. He's, you know, he's like a metaphor for a philosophical concept. And the metaphorical discussion doesn't get dropped like it did over here, where, you know, they separated the gods from the philosophy. I mean, they didn't back in Greece, in ancient Greece, but when the West rediscovered ancient Greece in the Renaissance, they most certainly did eventually separate off the gods from the philosophy and attempted to bring scientific rigor to philosophy. So, now how did I get there?
Well, we were talking about the mantra record, yeah.
Yes, the mantra record. So, having studied that stuff, I started to practice the meditation. And now when I do asana, I spend another half hour sitting in meditation. And sometimes I do mantras. And when I learned the mantras, to me, they just begged for musical interpretation. And I heard all this music underneath them. Now, for a purist, what I did with those mantras might be regarded as sacrilege because, you know, they're paired off in many cases with melodies that are as ancient as the mantras themselves, and I clearly strayed from that. But my intention was to cross genres, you know, and to put together the East and the West in that way. And I wanted to do it because I think it's so poorly done most of the time. You know, music that has mantra in it is almost inevitably this syrupy, awful, new age garbage. And I thought, you know, this, you know, someone has to do a better job. I guess it's me. And I'm almost finished a second volume of those mantra songs. But, you know, again, like, I made those songs for my friends. And I put them online as a whim. And it's got kind of a culty following among yoga people. But
it's fascinating to listen to regardless, yeah. Even for someone who's...
Well, I'm glad that you're open to it.
Yeah, and I guess it's that bridging of the two is probably what pulled me in on it. You know, there's some accessibility for, you know, I mean, I don't live in the yoga world. My wife knows much more about it than I do, and I like it. It's just never been, you know, something I've dove into. But what you had done with the tracks made it just, you know, I think the easy way to say it is just a really enjoyable listen, you know, for something
I'm
different.
so glad.
Yeah.
Again, nobody ever talks to me about that record because it's just unknown. So it's really nice to hear. I appreciate that in a genuine way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
and they're really fun to make.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the second volume. Whenever that comes out, and for what it's worth, I mean, as I wrap it up here, I'm looking forward to anything and everything new that you have coming out, because I am a fan, and I have been from the very beginning, and I'm just so excited to know that you're still at it in any sense, because a lot of people, after 20 plus years, you find other things to do, and it sounds like you have found other things to do that might be keeping your sanity, but when the attention can turn to music, I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you very much. I'll hopefully have a mantra record to send you by the end of the summer, and so great talking to you.
All right, thanks, Brad. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right, we'll see you around.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
All right.